What's up? How's everybody doing? I'm going to see if anybody actually even watches this because if I remember correctly, when you do these, especially when you first start, like nobody watches. And it's even kind of more nerve wracking when nobody's there watching versus when people are actually watching for whatever reason. If you guys don't remember me, my name is Sean, and I have this show that I used to do called Witness Citizen. And I had some pretty great interviews. I interviewed everybody from Harry Reid to Lou Elizondo to, let's see, we had George Knapp. That was a good one. I think we had Jeremy Corbell on for a little bit. We had, man, the late, great Nick Pope. We had him once. And we had Vinny. Vinny always was on the show. That was always cool. And he'll be on again probably if I decide to keep doing this. Why? I don't even know why I'm doing this now, but here I am. I guess because like I have work and then, not much else going on, so I might as well talk about crazy stuff. The why I like talking about and following the UAP thing mainly is because it's an amazing mystery. You can't argue that. It's a mystery. You'll have some people who are like, no, it's not a mystery. It's freaking aliens from Zeta Reticuli, bro. And then you'll have other people and say, no, it's not a mystery. It's all balloons, my friend. But really, it's a genuine mystery because neither side really knows, in my opinion, what the UAP stuff is about. I'm not going to figure it out. But I'll definitely watch people try to figure it out. That's pretty fun. So what's going on with the UFO stuff? Something interesting happened today, as a matter of fact. So if you're not familiar, there's been in it, you'd have to be living under a rock, I guess, to not know that there's been people from inside the government going in front of Congress, testifying, saying, we got craft and biologics, and there's a non human intelligence that's visiting this earth and has been, more or less. I'm not directly quoting anyone, but they're saying things like that in front of Congress. Pretty incredible, right? And so, as time goes on, a lot of people are saying, hey, why don't we have more information? And I guess apparently the people that have been giving information to Congress behind closed doors and in skiffs have been afraid to give information because they all sign non-disclosure agreements with whether it be, a government intelligence military branch or like a aerospace company like a Lockheed Martin, for instance. And so they can't say anything because if they do, that's it. They go to jail. They're done. It's over. So, and when you think about it, of course they wouldn't want to give information because of that, Why would they want to, hang themselves out to dry to give some information that might not go anywhere and wind up just being something that gets them in big trouble and ruin their life? Like, there have been people who have come out and spoken publicly through Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp. They have this podcast called the Weaponized Podcast, and they've had interviews with some people who have come out and talked about this stuff that they know from inside. Matthew Brown is one. And you listen to these people, and they're super honest, good dudes. And I've dealt with people for a living my whole life. Hired, fired, trained, sold, bought, all sorts of stuff. And I've done pretty well on that. And my gut instinct, my intuition tells me these people are good people and they're being honest with what they're saying. The hard part is what they're saying is pretty out there, pretty wild. So, but you should check out that podcast, listen to it for yourself. All the people who have come out, like I would say in the last few years, that have actually come from government seem to be relatively honest and good people. Tons of people hating on Lou Elizondo apparently for whatever reason. I leave this universe for 3 years. I come back and everybody hates the guy. Well, not everybody, but I think people just get a little rambunctious, because they're not getting the goods. It's that person's fault, but it's nobody's. It's none of their faults, If all that's true, all that stuff, it's 80 years of fault, not one person, At least how I look at it. But it's all just very interesting. So, anyways, back to the NDAs. So today, the Trump administration comes out and says, hey, you know what? If you have information on this stuff, we will waive your NDA so you can say what you want to say. So that's pretty crazy. So people can go to AARO, which is the government's AARO is like the government's UAP investigation arm out of the Pentagon. They get mixed reviews for sure. At first when they started doing it, everybody's so excited. Oh my gosh, here we go. Turns out some guy named Sean Kirkpatrick, he was the guy heading it up, and he was a major douche. Apparently. I don't know him personally. He had a cool first name. I can say that. I'm trying to share my screen, but this ain't working. It's been a long time, my friend. So, that didn't go very well. And he was actually pretty condescending, I have to say. In like his in his when he would like testify and stuff like that. So I don't know why this ain't working. Let's see if this works. Share window. Oh yeah, there we go. Boom. But anyways, back to the NDA. So long hidden UFO information at center of Trump push to free former officials. Former employees can now share information with AARO or the Pursuit Task Force without fear of violating agreements. NDAs. See, these news sources are smarter. They don't use that language because nobody really knows what it is. No one knows, for the most part, what an NDA is, right? I'm sitting here talking NDA, non-disclosure agreement. Most people would be like, what the hell are you talking about? Well, that's what I'm talking about. So President Trump has directed federal agencies to waive prior NDAs. Okay, maybe they do use it. For former government employees and contractors cooperating with UAP investigations. President Trump recently directed the Department of War and the intelligence community to allow former government employees or contractors that have relevant information about the disclosure of UAP to come forward to meet with designated government reps, AARO, or the President's UAP Task Force Pursuit, and have their prior NDAs abrogated, a senior administration official said. So, what's going to happen? And those are very nice shoes. Look at that shoe. Oh, his foot just goes in there. Looks great. So what's going to happen? I don't know. Maybe something, maybe nothing. You would think something. There are a lot of people that have, talked about how people would come forward if that happened. A couple of people, like Eric Davis, Hal Pudoff, right? So let's see if they do it. But I have to say, unless there's something I don't know, which there is a lot of, I'm hoping that there's other people other than them that know something. But I'm kind of on the fence on the whole thing, even what I believe, anyways. So I don't know what's going to happen. It's interesting to watch, though. Interesting for sure. One of those people that I mentioned earlier that was a whistleblower that talked with the Weaponized podcast, Matthew. A part of his, yep. Finney says it'll be a slow process, for sure. It always is. Hopefully, by the time we're dead, we'll know if there's something legit or not, at least. And what I mean by that is by the time we're real old. Because you can die whenever. But we'll find out one way or another. I mean, I think that's good. I mean, you waive the NDAs, people can say what they want, have that waived. That's a big thing. I mean, a part of the whistleblower thing, and you see this in other topics, right? Whether it be like Havana syndrome, or you hear about it with like COVID stuff, or all sorts of stuff. Just like people trying to blow whistles and having their career destroyed, being harassed, having their security clearances revoked. I've never had one, but apparently it's a pretty big deal. They would never give me a security clearance. I wish they would. I would love to be like an intel agent or something, but they have that revoked. Careers destroyed. Families broken up. And this isn't just like UAP stuff. It's like you can see this happening in other instances. That's like the history of bureaucrats in the government, because think about it, people don't want to admit to lying or be exposed for a big screw up, and they'll go to the ends of the earth to protect themselves. So, hopefully with this process, it gives some people a little more comfort, but still, you're asking a lot from people to come forward and tell you secret stuff. I mean, just because you can void your NDA doesn't mean there's not going to be jerks still coming. They're not coming after you anymore, trying to ruin your life. I mean, I was away from this for 3 years, and I'll tell you that one of the main reasons I was gone is because I got divorced. And one of the things that she told me was she didn't like the UFO stuff, And so I quit my channel, shut it down in hopes that maybe I would save something, Didn't work. Still left. Even though a coworker at the time had the insight to tell me, Sean, did you ever just think that maybe she's just an idiot? And you hope. But so I'm starting from scratch. I was up to like 7,000 subscribers. That was crazy. All poof, gone. Well, that's okay. So this is already starting better than last time, because I remember when I started the show years ago, my first episode, I mean, I still don't know what I'm doing, but I definitely knew a lot less of what I was doing then. And I don't think anybody was live watching it. And at least this number says 21. So that's a 20% increase over the last first episode I had. For sure. So anyways, I'm getting off on a tangent here about, I don't even know what. We were talking about witnesses. Oh, yeah. The Matthew guy who's on the Weaponized podcast. So he, so coming back after all these years, I was not even really paying attention to a lot of stuff that was happening. So I'm coming back to a lot of new stuff, like these new whistleblowers. And the Matthew guy brought forth something called Immaculate Constellation that he had learned about and testified and brought to Congress about. And basically, what it is, I might screw this up, but it's some sort of AI system that pulls like good videos or, videos that have certain traits to them that would be UAP related and pulls them from the government system so nobody else can see them, basically, more or less. I totally screwed that up, I'm sure, but that's probably layman's terms. That's what it is. So, of course, and he gives some descriptions of videos that are on that, like some pretty intense descriptions from equilateral triangles to, of course, spheres, discs, all that kind of stuff. And, there's, I've said this before, there's a crowd that is all in on that stuff, believes every word, eats it up. There's a crowd that seems to get off on making fun of people who believe it. Their whole life is about, bullying and making fun of people who believe it. Then there's people that are kind of in the middle, thinks, well, maybe there's probably something there, but I don't know if it's all that, but it might be something. I'm kind of in there, mainly because I've seen something myself that I don't know what the heck it is. Not a ship or anything though, so that's why it's like for me, it's like, yeah, maybe not. So, but anyways, people weren't believing it. The Immaculate Constellation stuff. So, what's interesting is, in looking at that document, you got two monitors, stuff's all over the place. Where did it go? Okay. So I was reading it, right? And well, the first things that I kind of checked out were those tranches, that were released, Department of War UAP stuff. And this is just, sorry, getting used to all this stuff again. I'm trying to share something with you. And so I'm reading some of that. And this one, I watched a lot of videos and stuff, and at first sight it's like, okay, there's nothing all too interesting here, and to be honest, there really isn't. But let's, for a couple of reasons, I feel like, first of all, the systems that the videos and footage are taken on are not meant to take high quality, high definition, or like IMAX quality videos. So what do you expect, right? And also, it's something I learned from Matthew and his podcast is that they're very compressed. So you lose a lot of um, clarity with that, especially the longer the video is, the more it's compressed, the less it's going to look good. But anyways, so I kind of watched those, didn't really think too much of it. And then I get back around to listen to that podcast. I look up what the Immaculate Constellation is, because I'm a curious person. So I look it up and I start reading this thing, and I come to this one and I read this description of a video that's in the Immaculate Constellation. It says supersonic range follower intercepts USN fighter on USG networks. There exists FLIR footage and radar data of a supersonic UAP of uncertain characteristics conducting a head-on intercept of a U.S. Navy fighter operating off the eastern seaboard, which is kind of like where Ryan Graves, if you're familiar with him, he came out and testified, and that's where they, that's pretty vague area, but eastern, United States is where that was happening. So they see it emerge from a cloud bank at high speed and approaching the USN aircraft head on, rapidly passing over the left side of the cockpit. Radar data from this approach tracks the UAP on its approach towards the craft, providing information on speed, heading, and evaluation. So interesting, right? But we have some pretty clear-cut descriptors there, right? First of all, it's coming head on, passes over the left side, right? Range follower. Can't really tell the characteristics of it, right? So keep that in mind. So I read that and I start thinking like, I feel like I've seen that. I don't know if it's brain or what, but did a little pattern recognition. And this video was released by DOW in their pursuit. Look at that. Over the left side, it's on the eastern seaboard as described on the website. Uncertain characteristics. To me, that seems like a dead match. Now, how do we know for certain? I guess we don't really know. How can you really know for certain? I can't. All you can do is your best. And that's a pretty close example. So if that's it, of course, they didn't give us any data on these videos either. So, but this excerpt in Immaculate Constellation says that there is data available for it. So they need to give us the data for that video if we want to learn a little bit more. But maybe a reason they don't is because we'd be able to pair it with this from the Immaculate Constellation document and know that it's legit. And then if that's legit, everything else in that document is probably legit, and everything else in that document is pretty out there. I mean, we're talking reproduction vehicles. Now that gets into the super woo side that I don't feel comfortable getting to be quite honest with you. But it's in there. You don't give something like that to Congress if you don't believe it, if you haven't seen it, because you can get a whole lot of trouble for that. But I don't like to think too much about that. I'm really comfortable in my apartment with my dog and just, working, watching Seinfeld. So we would need that radar data, because they have information on speed, heading, and elevation. That's the exact kind of stuff that we need, but they don't give us. They give us these videos where we can't tell what it is with no data. Which is interesting because you have the Avi Loeb thing. Avi Loeb interviewed that guy a ton of times when I had my show. Brilliant guy, Harvard, right? He's the head of some UAP council for the White House, right? Which is funny because he used to always answer my emails even when I didn't have a show. All of a sudden, he's head of this big council. I sent him an email. Nope, no reply. Somebody's getting too big for their britches. I'm just kidding. I'm sure he's super busy, to be quite honest with you. But anyways, he's made it known that they're only looking at, unless there's something that happened after I heard this, but they can only look at unclassified information. Now, if that's the case, why can't we all just look at, like, if it's unclassified, we all have the same stuff that we can look at, right? But I guess unclassified doesn't necessarily mean public, but it should be public. But if it's just unclassified, then what are you doing? That's the same stuff AARO's looking at. So why do you need a council to do that? Just do it, That's my take on it. I just think that whole thing's kind of weird if you can only look at unclassified stuff. That kind of reminds me of back in the day, they used to have they brought in some smarty pants people to look at UFO stuff back in the 50s. They only looked at unclassified stuff. And guess what? We all know that you can't figure anything out from that stuff. So you need the radar data if you want any hope of finding it out. But honestly, if you're just going to see stuff that doesn't make sense, what are you going to figure out? Oh yeah, that's moving faster than anything we have. So okay. So what does that mean? Well, I don't know. It just means that's pretty fast. Great, thanks. Cool, bro. Cool story, bro. You know. So I guess really to get to the meat of it, a lot of hate Neil deGrasse Tyson would say, "Yeah, show me the body." But if they do, let's suppose there is a body. How do you disclose that to everyone? You show photos. That's a pretty big deal. You think people are going to go, "Oh, I seen the photo. Yep, it's real. There was a photo." I don't think it's that easy. You know. Hey, Keith, there he is. Best UAP cop in town. That guy he was on my show a couple times. Great guy. Look at him there with Lou. A couple of good smiles. But yeah, so let's say there's a body. I mean, you can't just show a photo of it. Nobody's going to believe that, especially with the advent of artificial intelligence. Although AI stuff is pretty, so far, seemingly obvious to detect. But it could all be AI and I wouldn't know the difference, whatever. But, and then you have a super divisive president. So if a super divisive president comes in that half the people love, half the people hate, he's like, here's a photo of an alien body that we have. Believe it. That's not going to work, man. Corbell actually said this on his podcast about a video. Is video ever going to be enough? Is video going to be enough? Probably not. So how do you do this? I think that's the big conundrum. Is if there's a craft, if there's a body, and you want to convince people that we have it and it's real, how do you do it? Documents, everything can be faked. And everyone will think it is if it upsets their paradigm. The only way to really do it is kind of something that, as far as I know, humans wouldn't be able to do. People have to have an experience with it. So, like, I wouldn't be here if I didn't see the weird thing in my backyard. But ever since, I know things that are possible that I thought not previously. It was just like a gut check, like, yeah, things can happen. And you may not always know what it is. But you have to come to terms, well, at least I had to come to terms with being okay with that. Being okay with not knowing. And that comes in all facets of life, right? Whether it's work, relationship, if you can be comfortable not always knowing everything, like, you're going to be all right. That's huge. And I think that's the same here. Another kind of interesting one from that Immaculate Constellation, right? Because I watched the videos first. A few days later, I listen to those interviews. I go and look up the document, and I read this one too. Large disk using clouds as concealment. Now it says Oprah footage, which is like a satellite thing. Interestingly enough, Matthew in the podcast on Weaponize says that was a mistake. It's not actually a satellite footage. Now I don't know what Oprah is, so if that's not relevant, I apologize, but I'm just throwing that in here. So footage of a large saucer-shaped UAP emerging within a dense cloud formation. The saucer registered black hot cloud formation emerging from against white cold clouds. With atmospheric disturbances caused by the saucer-shaped UAP visible. The saucer was between 200 and 400 meters in circumference. That's pretty big. Displayed symmetrical. We're not going to be able to see that on the video, unless maybe there's a higher resolution. Concavities on the upper surface. Saucer-shaped UAP emerges at a shallow angle, traveling upwards towards the outer atmosphere. After breaking above the cloud cover, the saucer-shaped UAP suddenly reverses its direction, descending partially back into the cloud cover, then accelerating rapidly out of frame and partially obscured by the cloud tops. This behavior was evasive in nature and implied that the saucer-shaped UAP had become aware that it was under observation by a space-based collection platform. So apparently it wasn't under a space-based collection platform, or for some reason he said it wasn't on the podcast. I don't know. But Terry Bradford. Sorry, jumping on late. Yeah, whatever, man. I'll watch at 1.5 speed to catch up. You better make that 3. Triple that speed, baby. So anyways, I read that description. I think, I've seen something like that. Oh, that's the wrong video. That's embarrassing. That's live, you know? Anything can happen. It's crazy out there. Check it out. I mean, come on. That's the description. An immaculate constellation. From the disturbances to the... Now this is... I screen recorded this, so this is terrible, and I'm sorry about that. But... but you get the point. Out in... You know... Pretty wild. I'll say that. That ain't no balloon. Well, I mean, what do I really know? Maybe it is, but sure doesn't look like it. So there we have 2 descriptions, Immaculate Constellation, that hook up with 2 of the videos released in the Pursue thing by the Department of War. That kind of says to me that that document, Immaculate Constellation, might be true. Looking pretty true. And then people on X were like, hey, Matthew, is this, you know, because I made a post, right? Oh, it was so popular. What a popular post. I've never posted something so popular in all my life. And people are asking him, tagging him, say, hey, is that right? He doesn't say anything. I don't think he can't say anything. But I'll tell you, he probably, well, you get, you know, you always hear, you can't confirm or deny. So maybe that's like being silent is can't confirm or deny. Or, you know, because otherwise you could say, nope. But he can't lie. He's not going to lie. So he would have to say, yep. But that would give you kind of, that would probably mean that that document or whatever may have helped point people in the right direction for videos to release, perhaps. Drinking pink drink. And put those electrolytes in there, baby. So interesting stuff. I think that document's pretty legit. And we need some more data on those videos, that's for sure. You can't just send us, you know, oh, we're gonna release all this information. Here's videos that we can't, that you don't know anything about. That's my dog Kenobi back there, by the way. And that's just ridiculous. That's like a faux disclosure. And then the other one too, with the people in the helicopter on the East Coast, there's FBI agents, right? I think they're FBI, sorry, but they're investigating some loud disturbances, explosions around this test range, right, for hours. And then all of a sudden they start seeing these orbs, right? Which we got to talk about orbs for, you know. I have some conflicting feelings about that. But, anyways, I start seeing these things. And the thing that kind of did it for me was that person on the ground was watching the helicopter. One of these orbs got from 10 feet underneath the chopper, right? And there's a picture of it, which is pretty interesting, of an object right below the helicopter. So that is getting better, but we need more, right? Because wouldn't that be a video? We need to see that video. And I don't know. I was going to look it up quick, that picture, but I don't think I want to sit here and look for that right now. So I'm not going to do that, but we would need to see that video. That would be pretty good. So the orbs thing. The problem with the orbs is anything can be an orb. You know, you have all these people posting like satellites. Oh, this orb came last night. Look at it. Look at this orb. Dude, bro, there's satellites all over the place. It's crazy. It's cuckoo land with the satellites. It's insane. Technically, you could say it looks like an orb to you because you can't see anything. But it's a satellite, bro. And planes too can look like satellites, right? Especially jets when they have the contrail going. You got kind of like that sunset vibe. Sometimes there's a little orb. You know, you got to make those connections. That's a jet because you can see the plume. It's not an orb. So you got to go back to the 5 observables, right? Instantaneous acceleration, if it does that, right? Maybe I forget what the 5 observables are really, but you know, like a 90-degree turn, something like that. You know, look for it moving crazy like, not just a slow moving orb. Otherwise, you can just start the Bledsoe cult. Everybody can just get together and look at satellites and film them and say Orb City. You know, start at Orb City. Could be fun. So, but then again, you know, like what I saw, especially the second day, was pretty close. It was like over my garage. It looked, you know, and it was basketball size, and I wouldn't know how else to describe that. But an orb. So that does mean that, oh, did my picture go out? Uh-oh. Oh, there we go. We're back. Yeah, so I don't know. We got to 40 minutes anyways. There's 42 people here watching. There's a couple more things that I can do here before we get out of here. One is I can show you. I think we would have to do this. Maybe. No, I was going to share like a. Maybe like a document, perhaps. That's not going to work. No, I'm not going to do the document. And we're having these gremlins in the system here. So we might just call it. Yeah, I think we're going to call it Maybe my camera's overheating or something. All right, I'm going to call it. Thanks for your time and hanging out. I'll see you next time. Peace out.